Imagine living in a quiet American suburb. Kids play in the yard. Neighbors greet each other by name. And the loudest sound on a weekend is a lawn mower starting up. You feel safe, familiar, protected. Now imagine this illusion shattering, not with a bang, but with whispers. Footsteps outside your window, faces you don't recognize, lingering just out of reach. The police come, but they find nothing. The fear stays, and then one day, someone ends up dead. Brutally. Inside that very home. This isn't the start of a horror movie. This happened in Strongsville, Ohio, a place where families thrived, and the idea of violent crime was almost unthinkable, until one man decided to turn fear into a weapon and masked his intentions behind 2 years of lies. Today, we're diving into a case that went far beyond a murder, a case of psychological manipulation, of deception so deep that even the victim welcomed the killer into her home, fed him, and gave him shelter. This is the murder of Melinda, and the truth behind her killer is something you won't believe. Before we move forward, consider this. What happens when the threat you fear is the person you're trusting to protect you from it? Let's go back to the beginning. To understand the tragedy, we need to meet the family at its heart. A household that, on the surface, seemed filled with love, promise, and purpose. It was early 2016 in Strongsville, Ohio. Bruce and Melinda had spent decades in the same cozy home, the kind of place where birthday banners still hung from past celebrations, and the fridge was cluttered with childhood art. They were known in the community, friendly, helpful, always showing up when someone needed a hand. Melinda wasn't just a mother. She was a teacher, a mentor, a coach. For over 20 years, she had helped shape young minds at the local middle school, and she was adored for it. Even outside the classroom, she stayed involved, coaching community sports and volunteering. Her son Kyle, who had Down syndrome, was a constant by her side. She included him in everything. It wasn't charity, it was love. The community admired her for it. She became a symbol of strength, empathy, and grace. Then came the news. Their daughter Anna, just 20, had something to tell them. She was pregnant. Joy and worry arrived hand in hand. Bruce and Melinda were thrilled. The thought of becoming grandparents made them light up. But there was also concern. Anna worked as a waitress in a chain restaurant. Her fiancé, Jeff, had a job as a technician for an HVAC company. They were both young and just starting out, struggling to cover even daily expenses. Affording rent or preparing for a child felt overwhelming. So Bruce and Melinda did what good parents often do. They offered their home. "Move in," they said. "Stay as long as you need. We'll help you raise your baby." It was a generous offer, the kind many parents might hesitate to make, especially in a culture where independence is often prized over family support. But to Melinda and Bruce, it wasn't even a question. Anna accepted. Jeff did too. And by June of that year, their first child was born. A baby girl. The house became fuller, louder with baby cries, meals shared over bottles and burp cloths, and tired laughter from new parents figuring it all out. For a moment, everything seemed as it should be. But life has a way of hiding shadows behind smiles. And in this case, the darkness wasn't far behind. The first time it happened, Jeff thought it was a prank. It was a calm night, months after the baby had arrived. Anna was in the kitchen preparing dinner, the baby gurgling in a high chair nearby. Jeff, leaning by the window, caught a flicker of movement outside, just enough to unsettle him. He peered through the glass. 4 figures stood silently in the backyard, smoking, watching the house, not moving, not talking, just standing. It wasn't just creepy, it was confusing. Jeff waved Anna over. She looked out and froze. They didn't recognize the men. None of them looked familiar. They weren't neighbors. They weren't delivery drivers. They didn't seem lost. Just present, uninvited. And then they began to move. Not toward the house, but through the yard, fiddling with the trampoline, tapping the garden hose, circling the shed like cats sniffing out something unfamiliar. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't harmless either. It was a violation of space, of privacy, of peace. In a town like Strongsville, trespassing wasn't just odd, it was serious. So Anna called the police. When the sirens came, the strangers scattered. The officers were polite but unimpressed. No property damage, no violence. They checked the area, filed a basic report, and offered the usual advice. Call us if they come back. Melinda and Bruce were confused when they returned home. This kind of thing didn't happen in their neighborhood. They had lived here for decades. It was a quiet, proud community. People looked out for each other. Kids rode bikes. Doors were often left unlocked. Who would target them? But that night, the family tried to shrug it off. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe just drunk teens cutting through the yard. Everyone has bad nights, right? Except, this wasn't the end. It was just the first knock at the door, before something much darker let itself in. What no one knew, not even Jeff's fiancée, not even Jeff's in-laws, was that the first brick in the wall of deception had already been laid. And the man who claimed to be the most afraid was the one holding the blueprint. Weeks passed. Life tried to return to normal. But normal was gone, because the second incident made it clear this wasn't random. It was November 2016. Anna was home alone with her baby. Jeff was out working. Bruce and Melinda were running errands. The house was quiet, ordinary, until she heard the doorknob turn. Not the front door, the back. Anna froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. No visitors, no deliveries, and the click of that handle felt deliberate. She picked up her daughter, tiptoed to the door, and then she saw it. A face, pressed against the glass. A man. Someone she didn't know. Staring straight into the house. Their eyes met. For one horrifying second, Anna couldn't move. Neither did he. Then, like a startled animal, the man ducked and disappeared. Anna ran, clutching her child, locked herself in the nursery and called the police. They came. They searched. They found nothing. No footprints, no damage, no witnesses. Another shrug, another report. But fear doesn't need evidence to take root. That night, Anna couldn't sleep. Neither could Melinda. They double-checked the locks, slept with lights on. They started keeping Kyle out of sight, not just for safety, but because he couldn't understand what was happening. And that made it worse. It wasn't just fear, it was helplessness. And that's where paranoia begins. Every creak, every flicker of movement outside became a possible threat. Every knock at the door sent hearts racing. The family went from welcoming to walled off. No one wanted to say it aloud, but they were scared, not just of being watched, but of not being believed. Melinda especially struggled with the weight of it. She was used to being strong, supportive. She was a mother, a caretaker, a community figure. She couldn't show fear, but she was afraid. Afraid that whoever was outside was just getting started. And she had no idea that the danger wasn't outside the house at all. It was already living in the guest room. Before she was a victim, Melinda was a pillar. To those who knew her, she wasn't just a teacher. She was the teacher, the one who stayed after school to help struggling kids, the one who volunteered to chaperone dances, the one who remembered birthdays and asked about your parents. She taught at the local middle school for over 20 years. Thousands of students passed through her classroom, and dozens more through the soccer teams she coached on weekends. She wasn't flashy, but she was reliable, the kind of woman who made everyone else's life a little easier, even if it made hers a little harder. Her students called her Coach Mel. Parents trusted her, colleagues respected her, and in a town like Strongsville, that kind of consistency doesn't go unnoticed. And then there was Kyle, her youngest son, born with Down syndrome. Melinda refused to let the world sideline him. She made sure Kyle was involved in everything: soccer games, community fairs, local parades. Wherever Melinda went, Kyle was close behind, grinning from ear to ear. You see, it's easy to be a good person when life is easy. But Melinda stayed good even when life wasn't. That's what made her so loved. And perhaps what made her so vulnerable. Because when the harassment began, no one could understand it. Who would target someone like her? There were no enemies, no scandals, no secrets, or so everyone thought. So when the anxiety set in, Melinda blamed herself. Was it something she did? Something she missed? Was she overreacting? And yet, even as fear gnawed at her edges, she stayed calm. For Anna, for Bruce, for Kyle, especially for Kyle. She posted on Facebook asking whoever was behind the harassment to stop, pleading, not accusing, because even then, she believed the best in people. And it was that belief, that goodness, that made what happened next so unbearable. When she died, the town didn't just lose a teacher. It lost a symbol, a safe space, a reminder that kindness still mattered. But even more tragic, the person who destroyed that legacy had eaten at her table. As the months dragged on, the harassment didn't stop. It evolved. One night in January 2017, Bruce's car, parked right outside their home, was smashed. The windows were shattered. A laptop inside was gone. It was the first real damage. And yet it still didn't make sense. They weren't wealthy. They didn't flaunt anything. Who would go out of their way just to destroy, just to steal? It wasn't about gain. It was about disturbance. That night, the family sat around the dinner table in silence. The baby babbled. The adults didn't speak much. And in that silence, something unspoken settled in. This wasn't random. Someone was targeting them. And yet, no one looked at Jeff. Why would they? He was Anna's fiancé, a new father, just as afraid as the rest of them. He'd even rushed out into the night once with a flashlight, trying to confront the trespassers. He showed anger. He showed protectiveness. He showed all the right things, on the surface. But beneath that surface, he was watching, taking notes, planning. Because while the family lost sleep, Jeff was crafting an illusion. One where he was the loyal protector, the victim of chaos, the man trying to shield his young family from forces unknown. But the truth, he was the force. The so-called intrusions were choreographed. Every shadow, every threat, every fleeing figure. It was theatre. And Jeff was the director. Why? Because the more chaos he staged, the more innocent he looked. And the more isolated the family became, the more powerful he became. It wasn't just manipulation. It was psychological warfare, carefully measured, strategically executed. Melinda didn't know it yet, but she had welcomed a saboteur into her home, and her generosity had become a weapon against her. By the summer of 2017, the Melinda household was a fortress in name only, fortified on the outside, crumbling on the inside. Melinda couldn't sleep. Anna kept her daughter close at all times. Even Bruce, usually steady as stone, began to carry a quiet edge in his voice. And Jeff? Jeff kept playing the role. Then one night in July, it happened again. Anna and Jeff were watching TV in the living room, their daughter nestled between them. The baby was dozing off, the room dimly lit by the flicker of the screen. Anna glanced at the window. 3 men were standing in the backyard, smoking, staring, silent. It was almost exactly like the first time. But now, it wasn't just unnerving. It was infuriating. Anna panicked. Jeff didn't. This time he acted. He grabbed a flashlight, stormed out of the house, ready to confront them. But the figures scattered like ghosts into the dark. Again. By now, the local police had an entire folder on the family. Call after call, reports, interviews, nothing conclusive. But this time, they decided to dig deeper. They promised a broader investigation, a thorough sweep. But as always, there were no answers. No fingerprints, no footprints, no names. And then, the worst moment yet. Just a few weeks later, Anna heard it again. The sound of someone trying the back door. But this time, she saw it all. 2 men, shoulders lowered, trying to ram the door open. She screamed, loud and primal. The men bolted. Melinda, upstairs, heard her daughters cry and came rushing down. Police were called again, statements taken again. And again. Nothing. The family was unravelling. Sleep was rare. Smiles were strained. Melinda, for all her strength, started to crack. And Jeff? Calm as ever. Comforting. Stable. Present. The ultimate decoy. And that's what made him so dangerous. He wasn't the storm outside. He was the silence before it. It was a crisp October evening in 2017. Anna had picked up an extra shift at the restaurant where she worked. To make the evening easier, she planned a simple family dinner at the restaurant with Jeff, Bruce, and their toddler. After the meal, she would return to work, and Jeff would take the baby home with Bruce. Simple. Routine. They had no idea what waited behind their front door. When Jeff and Bruce pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The front gate was ajar, unusual but not alarming. Bruce knocked. It was Kyle who opened the door, the family's son with Down syndrome. He looked confused, quiet, as usual. But when they stepped inside, a suffocating silence met them. No lights on, no sounds, just darkness. Bruce called out, "Melinda!" No answer. He moved toward the kitchen. He reached for the light switch. And then, he saw it. Melinda, collapsed on the tile floor. Blood pooled beneath her. Still. Silent. Bruce froze. Jeff, holding his daughter, turned on his heel and ran, taking Kyle with him. Outside, he fumbled with his phone and dialed 911. Police and paramedics arrived quickly, but it was too late. Melinda had been stabbed 35 times, and shot 3 times. The scene wasn't just a killing, it was rage. Personal, brutal. And the method told investigators something chilling. The killer wasn't a stranger. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no alarms tripped. Whoever did this had been inside, all along. And the truth. It had been inside for nearly 2 years. In the hours after Melinda's death, grief gripped Strongsville like a vice. Teachers cried at their desks. Students laid flowers on the school lawn. Friends gathered on porches with red-rimmed eyes and whispered disbelief. But as the community mourned, the detectives got to work. And from the very first sweep of the crime scene, something felt wrong. There was no forced entry, no broken locks, no overturned furniture, no signs of struggle. Melinda had been taken by surprise, in her own kitchen during a mundane moment. The level of violence, 35 stab wounds, 3 bullets, wasn't random. It was personal. It was intimate. And then there was Kyle. He had been home the entire time. He had answered the door, but Kyle's intellectual disability meant he couldn't speak clearly. He couldn't describe what he'd seen, or who. That limited the suspect pool drastically. There were only a few people with access to the house, and with Kyle not able to recount anything, only one person could have pulled this off cleanly. And he had just called 911. Jeff. But even then, even with mounting suspicion, the truth felt too grotesque to consider. Jeff, the young father? Jeff, who had eaten dinner with Bruce and Anna just minutes after leaving Melinda's body on the kitchen floor. Yes, him. 4 days after the murder, police searched Jeff's car. In the trunk, they found it. The smoking gun. Literally. Bloody clothes. The knife. The gun. He had hidden them just feet away from where he'd eaten with Melinda's grieving husband. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Jeff confessed. But not out of remorse. Just inevitability. The man they had sheltered, the man they had trusted, the man they had embraced as family, had been orchestrating the family's collapse all along. Jeff confessed to killing Melinda, but he never said why. No apology, no tears, no explanation, only silence. And in that silence, everyone else was left to ask, what kind of man murders the woman who sheltered him? Who plans 2 years of psychological torment just to mask his own betrayal? What kind of darkness does that take? Theories emerged quickly. Some believed it was resentment. Jeff had been financially unstable. He and Anna had a daughter together but were still unmarried. Something Melinda, a woman of principles and structure, may have criticized. Quietly. Repeatedly. Perhaps it chipped away at Jeff's pride. Others pointed to something deeper. Not rage, but shame. That Jeff had been living under someone else's roof. That he couldn't provide for his child. That every act of kindness from Melinda, no matter how genuine, reminded him of what he wasn't. A provider. A man in control. And so he tried to reclaim that control in the worst possible way. Not with confrontation, but with manipulation. The harassment? Staged. The late-night prowlers? Actors, paid and planted. The car theft? A smokescreen? Jeff had constructed an entire alternate reality around the family. Months of fear, confusion and stress, just to create a backstory for Melinda's death. One where she died not at the hands of a trusted son-in-law, but by some external, unknown evil. But it wasn't unknown. And it wasn't external. It was Jeff, from the beginning. This wasn't a story about monsters outside the window. It was a story about a man who couldn't live with his own reflection. Psychologists have a term for what happened here. Grantee rage. It's the phenomenon where someone receiving help, instead of feeling gratitude, feels humiliation, powerlessness, resentment, because each act of generosity reminds them that they're not in control of their own lives. Melinda gave Jeff shelter. Jeff gave her death, not because of who she was, but because of what she reflected back to him. Failure. The court sentenced Jeff to life in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 33 years. But he left behind something that won't fade with time, a legacy of pain, confusion, and one terrifying question. If the real threat isn't outside your door, but living in your home, how would you ever know? If you found this story as haunting as we did, take a moment to reflect on the lesson beneath the horror. Evil doesn't always come crashing through your window. Sometimes it knocks politely. Sometimes it moves in. If you want more real-life cases like this, with deep analysis, psychological breakdowns, and stories that linger, subscribe and hit the bell icon. And remember, true crime isn't about fear. It's about understanding the shadows before they reach the door.